Hello everyone, my name is Carlos. I'm a web developer based in Brooklyn, New York, and today we're going to work on a project called Rock, Paper, Scissors, which is part of the Learning JavaScript path. Now, a few key concepts for this project, you should be a little bit familiar with control flow, and this is basically the way the code is executed, which is usually from top to bottom. We're also going to be working with switch statements, which are used to perform different actions based on different conditions. And lastly, we're also going to be looking into if-else statements, which are similar to switch statements. There are also conditional statements that are used to perform different actions based on different conditions. Each have their own use cases. We'll be using both for this project. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so hopefully you are familiar with this classic game. In case you're not, Rock, Paper, Scissors is a classic two-player game where each player chooses either rock, paper, scissors, and the items are compared, and whichever player chooses the more powerful item, then they win. So we have the possible outcomes listed here. Rock destroys scissors, scissors cuts paper, paper covers rock, and if there's a tie, then the game ends in a draw. So we're going to break down our code in order to actually have a few parts into it. There are going to be 4 specific parts. The first step will be to get the user's choice. Then we'll have a way to get a computer's choice, will be kind of a random decision from the computer. Then we're going to be comparing both choices, and we're going to be determining the winner. So we're going to start the program and display the results whenever the code is run. So let's go ahead and get started with the first task. We have about 14 to complete, and we'll be marking them as we complete them. So first thing we need to do is we should have the user be able to choose between rock, paper, scissors when the game starts. We're going to use key arrow functions here. So we're going to assign this to a variable called getUserChoice, which will take a parameter. So let's go ahead and type in const getUserChoice equals. Now, if there's only one parameter, we don't really actually need the parentheses. This is kind of optional. Usually use the parentheses if there's more than 2 parameters being written inside our function. I'm going to expand our code editor here so we can see a little clearer what we're writing down. All right, so this should be the first step, and I'll just remove the parentheses as well as for a little bit cleaner kind of view. Okay, now we can move on to the second step. For task 2, since the user can pass in a parameter such as rock or rock with a capital letter or lowercase, we're going to actually take that edge case into consideration, and we should actually lowercase whatever the parameter string comes in inside this code block. So we can actually even copy this line here where we actually reassign the user input to the lowercase version of that parameter. So if someone types in rock with a capital R, this will reassign the user input into a lowercase r. Okay, we can move on to step 3. Just make sure you save your code as you type it down. Okay, for step 3, when getting the user's choice, you should also check to make sure that the user typed a valid choice. Rock, paper, scissors, because what happens if they type in fork or potato as a parameter? We're not really going to be taking that as a user choice because we can't compare that with rock, paper, scissors. So inside the actual function, we're going to write an if-else statement to make sure that the user input is either rock, paper, or scissors. And if it is, we'll return that string. Otherwise, we'll console log an error message to let the user know that they typed the wrong message. So let's go ahead and open up an if-else statement here where we have the expression. Let me just correct some of the space here. So this is what an empty if-else statement looks like. The parenthesis here will hold the actual expression. And in this case, we want to make sure that the user input equals specific strings, which are rock, paper, or scissors. So we're going to check for 3 things here. First of all, we want to check if user input equals rock or user input equals, let me clean this up a bit here, scissors, or user input equals paper. Make sure your spelling is correct here, otherwise you might get an error. So if this is if the user input equals either rock or scissors or paper, we're going to return user input. Otherwise, we're going to console log a message here that basically says error, please type rock, paper, or scissors. Let's go ahead and save that. Now we're not using an AND here because an AND here doesn't make sense, because we're actually just checking one user input. User input holds one value here. So we're going to use OR. So if either of these are true, we will return the user input. Okay, make sure you save your progress, and we'll check step number 3. So we can move to step number 4 now. And in this case, we're actually going to be testing our function by calling it with valid and invalid input and printing the results to the console. So in order to do this, we actually have to console log whatever is returned from this function call. So let's pass in some parameters that make no sense. Pass the correct one, so let's pass a valid one, which has to be paper, rock, or scissors. Let's pass in paper. And let's also pass in get user choice, potato, whatever kind of string that is not rock, scissors, or paper. So let's open up our terminal and run it. And you can see that on the first case, we actually get a returned value, which is paper. And in the second one, we actually print out error, please type rock, paper, or scissors. This undefined here at the bottom is being returned because in this else statement, we're actually not returning anything. If we were to replace this with a return statement, for example, we wouldn't get undefined because we're actually returning a value here. But we're actually just printing something. So the side effect from this would be undefined because we're not returning anything. So hopefully that makes sense. There's a little bit more to that, but I'm just covering it on a high level so it makes sense to you guys. So let's delete this and we can move on to step number 4, where we actually have to create a computer choice. Oh, meant step number 5, not 4. So I'm expanding my editor again so we have a clearer look of what I'm writing. The next step would be to create a function called getComputerChoice with no parameters. And inside the block, we're going to utilize math.random and math.floor to get a whole number between 0 and 2. And then depending on that value, we're going to return either rock, paper, or scissors. So you can either choose if that random number is 0, it can return rock. If it's 1, paper. If it's 2, scissors. So let's go ahead and get started with that function. We're going to assign it to a variable called getComputerChoice. Takes no values, but we still need an empty parentheses with the arrow function here. Now, how does math.random work? Well, math.random returns us a floating point between 0 and 1. So if we were to console log math.random, and I can simply do that by console logging get computer choice and calling it. Let's open the terminal. Let's run this. You will see that we're going to be getting a floating point number between 0 and 1. And 1 is exclusive from this. So we'll never get 1.0. It will always be 0.9999999. So what we need to do here in order to actually get a number between 0, 1, and 2, we got to multiply it times 3. In this case, we'll get 0, 2.999 will be the max number. Next thing we actually need to do is we're going to round these numbers down. So we can actually just call floor on them. And that will return us a whole number between 0, 1, and 2. And there we go. So in order to make this a little clearer for us, what I'm going to do is assign this to a variable. And we'll call it random number equals math.floor. So let me get rid of this. I'll expand the text editor once again. And now we have an actual random number between 0, 1, and 2. Next thing we should do is return a value depending on this random number. So we've used an if-else statement, so let's use a switch case. You can use either one. If-else statement. So now depending on the random number, we're going to check if it's 0, it can return rock. If it's 1, it will return paper. If it's 2, it will return scissors. So let's go ahead and start our switch statement. Switch statement will open up with the actual term switch and a parentheses that will take in an expression. So in this case, we'll check the expression for random number. We'll open a code block here and we'll pass our case statements here. So our first case, what if random number is 0? We're going to return rock. So make sure you're using a colon here. We're not really passing parentheses or a code block. That's a common mistake. We're actually using a colon here. We're going to use the same kind of writing for the case of 1. We're going to return paper. And you know what? I'll make some more space here so we can see. And lastly, we're going to return scissors if the random number is 2. So check out the control flow in this case. First thing we do is we assign a random number to the variable called random number. And this number will be between 0, it will either be 0, 1, or 2. And then the next code block, we're going to use a switch statement to check the expression, the value of that expression, which is random number. And depending on the value, we're going to return a different kind of string. So you can see now that getComputerChoice is actually returning a string, so we should not get undefined printed on the terminal now. So let's go ahead and check number 5, and we'll go ahead to step number 6. In step number 6, we're going to test the function by calling it multiple times and printing the results to the console. So let's go ahead and simply call getComputerChoice. We don't pass any parameters. We'll do it a couple of times. So get computer, and then one more time. I can see I made a spelling mistake here. Console.log get computer choice, capital C. Let's open our terminal here and see what we get. Seems like I had an error. Console log get computer choice. Oh, I didn't capitalize the C here. Let's run this again. So you can see we're going to get different kind of results depending on the random number that is assigned to this variable. So if we run it again, it's going to be paper, 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 scissors, rock. So good. Now that we actually have a computer choice, we can continue on to step number 7. So I'm going to delete these guys. Do the same thing. Save your progress again. And let's go to 7. Now we actually have to determine a winner. Okay, so quick little recap here. We have a way to get our user choice, which we'll be actually typing down. And we have a way to get a computer choice. So now in order to determine a winner, we're going to have to compare both the user choice and the computer choice. There's going to be a few conditions because we need to check how each item will defeat each other. And we also got to make sure that we know when there is a tie. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to deal with the tie condition first. So let's go ahead and start writing our function, determine winner, which should take in both parameters user choice. And in this case, we do need a parentheses since we're using 2 parameters. Computer choice, open up our code block. And in here, we're going to deal with the first condition, which will just be a tie. So in order to check if it's a tie, we simply compare the user choice and see if it's equal to the computer choice. And if it is, well, we simply return a little string that says that the game is a tie. So let's open up our if statement here. So if user choice equals the computer choice, open up the code block, and we'll return a string that says this game is a tie. Go ahead and save that, and we can move on to the next step. Let's check number 7. We'll go on to 8. Okay, so now we need to check if the game is not a tie in order to determine a winner. So we're going to begin by running an if statement that checks if the user choice is a rock. So that will be the first statement that will check if it's a rock. We need to actually nest another if statement to compare it to the computer choice. Okay, so let's open up an if statement here that simply checks if the user choice is a rock. Let's open up a code block. Now, don't get intimidated by nested if statements. Nested if statement is pretty straightforward. It works very similar to just your regular if statements here. The nested if is an if statement that is the target of another if or else. So if a nested if statement means an if statement inside another if statement. And we're allowed to nest as many if statements as we can. So in this case, we have the user choice. And inside this if statement, we're going to check the computer choice. So we got to make sure that the computer choice equals a certain type. So in here, we can check if the computer choice is equal to paper, well, we know that paper beats rock. So in this case, we'll return a string that says, sorry, computer won. Otherwise, we know that rock beats the other two cases. Well, the first case will be at the top here. So if it were to be another rock, then we'll return this string. So the next else statement will be comparing it to scissors, which would mean that you are winning, that you won. So we'll return a string that says, congratulations, you won. Okay, make sure you save that. Okay, let's check step number 8 and move on to step number 9. So we're going to basically use the same kind of flow we did for just this case for the following two cases. So we got to write another if statement for to check if the user choice is paper and check the actual value of the computer choice from there. So below this nested if statement, let's write another one. I'll make some more space as well here so we can see what we're writing. Okay. So if the user choice is equal to paper, we'll put in our nested if statement here where we check what the computer choice is. So if the computer choice is scissors, well, we know that scissors beat paper, so this will mean that the computer wins. Sorry, computer won will be the returning string. Otherwise, you win. So we can typically type in congratulations, you won. Go ahead, save this. So it's essentially the same if statement we used in the previous case. So we can move on to step 10 now. And in step 10, we'll do the same thing, but to check if the user choice is equal to scissors. Now you could essentially copy paste this and just change the value of user choice and computer choice, but I suggest you guys type it down so you actually see what exactly is happening as you're typing it down. So let's go ahead and type in user choice is equal to scissors. And in this case, if the computer choice is equal to paper. Sorry, that's wrong. It should be rock, because rock beats scissors. In this case, sorry, computer won. Also, you can actually reorder these so that if the computer chose something else, you can actually type in the if statement here where you win, and the else case would be sorry, computer won. The order doesn't really matter since we're checking all the edge cases here. So if this is, if the computer chose anything other than rock, that means that you actually win. So we'll return congratulations. Congratulations, you won. Okay. So that's it for step 10. We'll go on and move forward. So now we can actually test our function. So let's make some space here, and we can actually call the function to see what we get on the terminal. So remember, the first choice is user choice and computer choice. So when we actually console log it, just keep in mind in what order you're actually passing in the parameters. So determine winner. Let's make the user win. So let's say we pick rock and the computer picked scissors. So the first one should be you won. We can determine winner again where we have the user lose. So let's have him pick paper, and the computer will pick scissors. And then let's go ahead and do a tie as well, where we both pick rock. Let's close this. We'll open up our terminal and just run it, and we'll see that in the first case, you actually won. The second one, the computer won, and in the last one, we have a tie. So it seems that all edge cases seem to be working. Feel free to mess around with it and make sure if there's any errors, kind of read the line error where it states. Most likely it's spelling mistake, or maybe you missed some sort of syntax error. So let's go ahead and clean this up. Since we know that our function is working properly, make sure you save your progress. I'll expand again the code editor, and we'll continue on to step number 12. Okay, now that everything is set up, we need to actually start the game and log the results. So we're going to create a function called playGame, and we're going to put in some logic there to actually take care of the flow of how we're going to determine a winner and how the game is played. So let's go ahead and start by writing our function playGame. It will take no parameters. Inside the code block, we're going to be passing all the information it needs to actually have a game be executed. So inside the playGame function, we're going to create a variable called userChoice, set it equal to the result of calling our function getUserChoice. So let's call this const userChoice, which will be equal to getUserChoice. We can pass in paper. Remember, we can pass in capital P2, whichever way you like, because we have the logic that takes care of uppercase and lowercase variables already. So we're going to pass that into our function. This will return the value paper, which will be assigned to a variable called userChoice. From there, we're going to create another variable, which will be computer choice. So const computer choice is equal to the function call of getComputerChoice. We don't pass any parameters to that function. Now, under both of these variables, we're going to use a console log to print them to the console. So you can use interpolation here, or you can just simply add a string with adding. I'm going to use just a string with adding as well. So u through, and then we add the actual string here, which will be a variable called userChoice. And we'll do the same for the computer, console.log, the computer through. Make sure you add a space before adding the actual string. Computer choice. In case you're curious, you could actually write this down with string interpolation with backticks, where you actually type u through, and then you pass in a $sign with curly brackets, and then here the curly brackets. So you can do both. It's personal preference. This string interpolation is a little bit more modern, so just in case you weren't familiar, that's how you actually write it. Okay, so after we actually have the console logs, we can save this and move on to the next and final step. So now that we actually are able to get the user choice and computer choice, the last thing we need to do is basically call our function determineWinner to actually figure out who won between the values passed in. So it's on a new line, we're going to pass in who won by console logging the actual return value of that our function called determineWinner. Now, we were testing it by hard coding certain strings and passing into it, but now we actually have variables that contain strings. These variables are assigned to strings that are given from the functions that we created. So we can simply just pass user choice and computer choice. Now, just a friendly reminder in case you didn't know, we also call them like this when we define the function, but we can name these variables whatever we want. If we label it ASDF, this will pass in ASDF. So don't think they have to be labeled user choice. The argument is basically the variable that we assign. And a little bit more lingo in case you weren't familiar, when we write a function, we call these parameters, but when we actually call the function, these are arguments. So the arguments passed in are the variables that we define here on line 52 and line 53. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is actually call the function playGame, because this is just a function definition. So let's go ahead and call playGame. And let's open our terminal. Let's see if we made any mistakes. And there you go. You threw paper, the computer threw rock. So we know that paper beats rock, so we won. And then you can run this a couple of times to make sure this is working. You can see there's a tie there. Paper and scissors. The computer won. Okay, looks to be working correctly. That's it for step 13. This basically concludes the project, but we also have a bonus step here. So let's go ahead and take a look at step 14. Okay, I'm gonna open up the code editor again so we get a closer look. To make this game better by adding a secret cheat code. So if a user types in bomb as their choice, then make sure they win no matter what. Okay, so we want to add an extra step here for the user choice. So we already can check first if it's rock, scissors, or paper. Next thing we need to do here in our get user choice, if we type in bomb, since it doesn't match any of these cases, we would get an error, please type rock, paper, scissors string. So we actually have to add in this statement here inside our get user choice function. So we got to make sure if get user choice, if user input is equal to bomb, that is also an acceptable input, which will be returning it. The last thing we need to do is in our way to determine winner, we have to make sure if the user choice is equal to bomb, then we simply return a statement where we win. We don't even check what the computer typed because we are automatically winners and we are better than the computer. So user choice is equal to bomb. We're going to return congratulations, you won. So let's open our terminal one more time. Let's go ahead and instead of passing in paper, let's type in bomb and see if we win. You threw bomb, the computer threw rock, you won. So we're always going to win here. Run it several times to make sure that the computer never wins. You can see that we're always winners. Okay, that concludes our project. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully this gave you a better understanding of how to use if statements, how to work with nested if statements, how the control flow works, and how to use switch cases as well. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.